witless fool. For children learn by example. Children learn not by idle words or threats, but children learn by that is done by those who would lead, who would counsel. Understand, those that would impel or force another are tyrants. It matters whether they are parent or not. Know ye that any parent that would be so witless, and most are, to demand, to force, rather than to suggest or direct, are only creating what? They are creating temptation. For that ye would deny of thy child will have an innermost urge to seek out. If ye do not let thy child play with fire, chances are the child will be burned to death. But if ye would let thy child burn its fingers once in a while, and simply suggest to it, simply guide, direct, but not demand, then that child will also inherit this mode of action and pass it on to his or her children. Children only learn by example. Therefore, those who choose to have the child in their home are simply enabling themselves to become a better teacher. To whom? To themselves. See?
Is there any benefit to children should their parents remain together and married if there is no longer love in the relationship of the parents?
The first that should be done is that the parents should understand. Most disruptions where there are children in the home can be traced partially to the ignorance of man of causing the home to revolve or center around that of the child. Whether the home should be created where the child is allowed to enter in, rather than as the child does enter in, then the home revolves around that of the child. This is selfishness. This is possessiveness to an ultimate degree, and as such will usually prove detrimental. Those that would remain in the bond of marriage where there is no love, and each are too selfish or ignorant to begin to learn to work at learning to love, for to learn to love requires an extra amount of work that most are not willing to put forth, then that marriage, for the sake of the child, for the sake of all, should probably be quietly dissolved. This is a misconception that is held by most. Now, this is not to say that there is any real injustice in this situation, you understand. For there is not a child that enters into any fleshly body, but what as a soul it does hover over that of the body of the mother and of the father before deciding to end, knowing at least sometime in advance the environment that is to be created. If there are two parents and their attitudes is one of loving, giving, being kind, generous, and brotherly, then these two are as one. At-one-ment can be met in marriage. If at-one-ment is attained by each to and for each other in the bond of marriage, then those souls entering in take on some of the karma, ye might call it, of the parents themselves, and are more easily influenced towards demonstrating giving the love of God to others. But those that would delude themselves and hold a marriage that is hated are those that would fool themselves. Now, if this marriage is dissolved, again, as we said, with anger, hostility, or grief, then all have lost. If one should decide to dissolve it with loving indifference, then at least one has gained, and hopefully the children would go with the one who possesses that loving indifference. See?
Is it at all detrimental to the well-being of children if their mother works outside of the home?
Matters not so much the time that is spent with that of the child. In this particular case, the stress should be placed upon quality of time, not quantity of time. For all minds are tied together, whether the physical bodies are present or not. And if a mother be laboring over that is the choosing of her choice as far as vocational pursuit is concerned, and she is loving towards that of the child knows that it is loved much better than that of the adult. See?
What all are the alternatives to having children if a couple desires to remain childless?
The other alternatives, if they would wish, is you may take an animal unto thy home if you choose, and give it love. You may take a flower into thy home if you choose, and give it love. Or you may take that of the physical child of yet another into thy home and give it love. Some of the happiest homes are those that decide among themselves as a couple to start their own little orphanage, you know. There can be happiness in numbers. This is only dependent upon the happiness that is in the mind of he and she, though. For those that have unhappiness in their home and would desire to bring forth a child under the illusion that it would bring forth happiness are eluded indeed from gaining the bond of happiness. For in most cases it usually creates more disruptions. Why? Because the parents center the home around the child rather than have the home centered around the parents and letting the child enter in. See?
You've said that the best way for an individual to attract an ideal mate is to be ideal.
He can attract none that are better, none that are worse.
Could you give some examples of how a person might go about doing this?
Improve thyself.
Is there anything further that you feel would be helpful to add here on the subject of home, marriage, and children?
We would simply give once again that there are no imperfect marriages, that all marriages are made in heaven. Each that is attracted to the other is done so first of all spiritually. Although man would say that the attraction is physical, it is first an attraction in the spiritual level, then in the mental level, then in the physical level. And as such, each should regard the marriage as the greatest opportunity in that of the earthly dimension in order to learn love. What is love? Love is giving. Love is God. God is law. Law is love. See? Awaken the physical form, please.
Thank you. Please remove all negative influences from this entity now.
Done.
Allow the body to become completely relaxed.
It is.
Allow any further healing which may take place to take place now.
We thank thee.
Please awaken now, feeling completely refreshed and relaxed.